IVM.
I look at myself as a creator. So now I don't sort of put any lines in terms of hey, am I a writer? So do I have any writing goals in life? Am I like a filmmaker? Do I have any filmmaking goals in life? I genuinely want to just be a creator. Creator can be I'm creating work through writing. I'm creating work through maybe directing. I'm creating for the internet. I'm creating for maybe the TV, the television, or I'm creating wealth. All right. So I look at creating wealth also as part of a job of a creator, the best venture capital firms, anyone who's enabling businesses or creating businesses themselves are also creating something. And I feel like most of my friends, when I talk to, they just draw the line saying that, hey, that's business. There's no creativity there, but there is a problem being solved there in a unique new way with getting rid of inefficiencies of the past, which is very creative, probably.
Hello and welcome to the Filter Koffee Podcast. Devaiah Bopanna is one of the most creative minds in India and one that is prominently shaping pop culture in this country. You just need to look at the writing rooms he has been in to realize that. In probably just over a decade, Devaiah has been part of some of the most culture-defining projects. He started off in advertising and then he was part of the writing team at AIB and then would become a part of the show that created AIB on Air, one of my most favorite shows in the last decade. Also a show that unfortunately died a premature death. Deviah was also a co-founder of All Things Small, creators of many amazing things, including my most favorite podcast from India, Mission ISRO. He, along with Tanmay and team, would then also create the famous CRED ads last year, and is now part of the founding team at Super Team DAO. DAO standing for Decentralized Autonomous Organisation in the Metaverse. I spoke to Deviah about this entire Alice in Wonderland sort of a journey of his and what it feels like to run one of India's first Web3 companies that is entirely in the Metaverse. I also tried to look at pop culture from his lens, and quite honestly, the view is staggering. Stay with us, we'll be right back on the Filter Koffee Podcast.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. Khel Niti completes 200 episodes. Rajiv Mishra, Nikhil Chopra and Rajkumar Sharma discuss the final test match between India and South Africa. They also talk about whether or not Virat will return as captain. On Think Fast, Varun and Suchita dig into Apple's $3 trillion market cap and Bezos' Chirag Din uncle look for New Year's Eve. On Raw and Organic, Kunal talks to pole fitness trainer and flexibility coach Joanna Michelle. On Pesa Vesa, Anupam finds out how REITs are beneficial from Vinod Rohira. He's the CEO of Mindspace Business Park REIT. And on Filter Koffee, Karthik talks to sports journalist Pradeep Magazine about his new book, Not Just Cricket. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. We really do appreciate the word of mouth. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms that you're listening to us on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is. And we are also on YouTube. On YouTube, you can check out our various channels on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and CoinSwitch Kuber. Thank you for making this possible.
Welcome to the Filter Koffee Podcast. Devaiah, how are you doing?
Thank you so much, Karthik. Doing very well. It's filter coffee time, 8:30 in the morning. Not my filter coffee hasn't woken up yet, so I'm still waiting for the milkman.
Okay. You now moved to Bombay, right?
Yeah. I live in Bombay.
Right. I mean, did you have to move for the various things you were doing? Because I largely knew you as like a Bangalore boy for the most part, I guess.
Yeah, so I was in Bangalore. So I started working in 2008. So till 2013, I was in Bangalore. And the thing with Bangalore advertising is that, after a point, any agency you move to, you are either working on one account from the USL, United Spirits Group. Then there's one account from Madura Garments. Then there is one account either from Britannia or ITC Foods. Yeah. So there's, at least at that point, the startup scene hadn't blown up yet. So it was you're just moving to a different office. You're not moving to a different job. So I got bored after a point, and then I was weighing my options and I'm like, hey, if I go to this agency, I'm working on the same set of brands. If I go here, it's the same set of brands. And most of the time it's the same set of people because people are also moving in the same 5-6 agency circle over there. So that's why, I never lived out. I was always I lived at home, full, very sheltered life. So I thought let's move and let's see what happens. And Bombay was a 2-year plan. So I moved here in 2013, thinking 1-2 years in advertising. And, in Bangalore at that time, there was a thing if you came from Bombay, your salary would have been a little higher because they just somehow assumed that you worked in the HQ types. And then I came here as 2013 and I've been stuck for 8 years now.
Yeah, I think you missed out on IBM, which is the key client in the South. Yeah,
exactly.
No, I'm just thinking, I was speaking to my friends who started advertising in Chennai. For them, it must be one client and 10 agencies fighting for that account.
Yeah. That is actually the truth, I think, in Chennai.
Yeah, it's not even a joke.
You have, I think, MRF or something. And everyone in Chennai is working on MRF. It's crazy. Any agency they're mostly working on MRF.
Yeah, and then probably Nippon Paint these days.
Correct.
So, yeah. But I feel you on Bombay, man. I think when we moved to Delhi 10 years back, I was South Indian guy whose Hindi is so terrible. I gave myself 2 years to stay in the city, and I ended up completely falling in love with the place. So, yeah.
Right.
Hey, this is, one chat I've been wanting to have for the longest time because there's just so many worlds that I want to revisit, where you've been in the last 10 years or so, which is actually amazing. The amount of things you've done, in the last 10 years is quite amazing. But I wanted to, I was just going through a LinkedIn post of yours where you were speaking about work culture, in the Web3 sort of a world. And, the last 60 days or so, my mind I'm up to here with Web3 commentary. But I found that very, very insightful and very true, right? I just wanted to probably start there, which is also your current innings, and then we can do a flashback of sorts onto that. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more too? To put this in perspective, I think you were talking about how, in a Web3 sort of a world, work culture is one where your personality is not necessarily what gets you recognition, right?
Correct.
Rather than me spoil it, can you spend some time on that thought?
Yeah, sure. So the basic disclaimer here is that it's been, for me, it's just very new. All right. It's been I think technically it's been my 3rd month in this space as a full-time employee or something like that. So
as a co-founder of Super Team. Right?
As a founding member actually. So really good thing is that what I've realized is there's nobody can be an expert in Web3 because it's just a few years old. So everyone is making probably a new mistake every day, and even the really big guys, and they're figuring, oh, okay, this is not how it is done. No, this is how it is done. So that way there are also no experts right now. But yeah, just coming back to that post, these were my observations over the last year and then last 3 months, just being fully actively involved. Is that, see, it is a world that is, you can look at it, that's pretty much governed by code. Okay, you remove human arbitrary rules and judgments, and you remove all that and just have a world that's governed by computer code and pretty much smart contracts. So what happens is the rules are set and you just have to, if you are abiding by those rules and you're playing your game well, you get your reputation. For example, in a normal current day jobs or whatever, you have to be a personality in office. You have to sort of be likable. You have to have a good rapport with your boss, for you to progress. Why is that? Because your KRAs are so arbitrary. Obviously, there is some number attached to it, but it is just more than that as well that takes you forward. You might be hitting your KRAs, but if you are not so liked and if you're very direct with people, it kind of hinders your career growth. I mean, I'm not saying in Web3 or something where you can be a total asshole and then you can still progress, but there's very little scope or little left for human judgment, because like, right now how it works is like, there are Discord groups. So you're part of like a Discord DAO where, if you want to look for work, you become part of a Discord community. And then like, over there, you try and get your reputation in the community by showing your proof of work. And then also like by how you interact with the members there, what you're like when you're talking about a particular point, like, how serious you are about that point. So it's literally like your brains and your work sort of allows you to progress in any given community because nobody is meeting. It's all virtual. And then you get to a place where you can land gigs in the community, so where like paid gigs. And then when you're landing your paid gig as well, so many times, and it's happened to me, like I'm working with people who choose to keep their identity anonymous. So I don't know which country they are from. I don't know what their real name is. I don't even know how old they are in most of the cases. So what happens is just, so you are talking to an entity just purely at a very work level. There is no context for any other form of judgment. So what really happens in these places? So then when you rise up the ladder in a community by showing your proof of work, you start getting work. And then it's basically just your reputation, your work reputation, that gets you more work. Suppose you take on work and you don't deliver it properly or don't do it well, your reputation points, if say some communities have reputation points, if that gets kind of screwed up, you are again back to ground zero. So it doesn't matter, like if you have like a really good rapport with the person you're working with, it doesn't matter if like, you are friendly with other community members, but if you don't deliver on work, your reputation points, and then automatically you're like gated out to another, like a layer 1 member with all the other lurkers around. So I think that is why with Web3, one opportunity here, because it is like, and why is this like it also like, we have to go back a little bit to say our current day work culture or our current day org chart. Okay, most of it, if you look at it, was built in the like before the internet came up. All right, like let's look at advertising. Okay, why is there like a client servicing person? All right, because there used to be no mobile phones earlier. Perhaps there used to be no local landlines earlier at all our homes, right? Like you needed one person to have that relationship with the client. The creative person can't possibly have like a landline at home or a mobile phone, be available to the client and keep working. All right. So many times I look at agencies, I'm like, why are there so many client servicing people on an account, right? Like, I mean, I've worked in the last 1.5 years on like multiple campaigns, and I think I've used a zero number of client servicing people, right? Because it's not rocket science. You get on a WhatsApp group with the client, you get on a WhatsApp group with the production house, like, you are available real time, and then you just move on and get your work done. So what has happened is like the lot of inefficiencies of the pre-mobile phone, pre-landline era have still carried on to current day normal work environment. And that, I think, if you look at Web3, that it kind of solves for that because it's born out of technology. So I think even the organizations that will be born out of technology will use technology as a way to govern inefficiencies in the system much better compared to human beings right now.
Right. No, I think I was just thinking as you were talking, like, the whole, even the word client servicing, right, is such a judgmental word, isn't it?
Correct.
I don't know why it was originally called that at all. I find the whole relationship sort of tilted. The DAO, which is, the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, which Super Team is the organization of which you're a co-founder. It's sort of for the uninitiated, do you want to probably spend a minute or so on how a day in the life of a DAO sort of works?
See, it's all evolving, okay? Right. Because there are very few, there are DAOs, but there are very few people actively working in the DAOs globally, probably like just a few thousand of them. And, that was my first thing when, so my co-founders or the people who are more senior to me in our team in terms of crypto, so when I sort of start full-time with them, I would be like, hey, okay, cool. What is a company like ours in the US or in the West doing? So what is their methodology? And there is nothing like that, right? So there is no methodology to ape. There are no reference points right now in this space. It's so new. So basically a day a normal day is supposed to be like, I get on to, we run mostly on Discord. So we get onto our Discord community. And then there is a bunch of projects that get listed. There will be, so ours is basically a service DAO. So you can imagine crypto companies or crypto founders across the world, they want a service. They want like a video, they want like say a deep dive on their product, they want some dev work done. So they just come to our Discord, and then they sort of list like their issue or a gig or a grant over there saying that, hey, need someone to do this. This is how much, what's our budget? Can someone take this up and do it? So right now, then, we go and then we sort of take on these projects, which are listed in the Discord. And sometimes, so basically then you create a working group in the DAO. And then the working group can consist of like a creator, a designer, depending on what the task is. And then there's obviously a leader who sort of ensures the working group is given tasks and then checks in, and then sort of they deliver on the task, and then they hand over once a project is done in the stipulated timeline. So that's how it works.
And the gigs right now, I know it's very early days and this will evolve probably. The gigs right now, are there a lot of brand related stuff? Is this still a bit of marketing? Are your clients actually on Web3?
Yeah, I think most 90% of our clients are all on Web3. So it all, they're on-chain clients trying to get the work done on-chain. Yeah, so it's mostly like right now it can be like right from a video to like, people in our Discord community have come together and even shipped products. Like, for example, a 16-year-old kid had this really cool product idea. So then he applied for an Insta grant in the DAO, where the DAO also sponsors bootstraps of, sort of gives you like very small amount of like say a seed funding, pre-seed funding to push your idea across. So, this guy, he put an Insta grant for this idea called wagme.bio. So it's like, it helps you, like, if you're on Web3, you have like a wallet, and usually the wallet ID is like a long 16, 17 digit code, which you will not remember, like not possible to remember. So you copy paste and send. So he came up with a very easy way of, connecting your wallet to another website where you can generate names very easily that you can remember. In effect, then he can control your invoicing. He can help you set up a dashboard for your payments. All the inefficiencies of a wallet he can solve using the product. So he's just 16 and he applied for I might be getting the age wrong, he might be 15. So I know he's below 16. So he applied for an Insta grant. The DAO gave him a grant because the idea was so cool. Then he took the grant that was given to him. He went back to the DAO. So he sort of got a designer. He himself is a developer. He got like a bunch of creators, put them together, and then he created the product and he shipped it. And so there are projects like this as well that are happening in the DAO.
Amazing, right? This is, for me, what's fascinating about Web3 is that there is no last mile in which you need to go about terrain, right? Correct. It's fairly self-sufficient world, so to say.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to always ask you is, I've been recently thinking about what we do for a living a lot, right? And I read somewhere that, I haven't done the math to cross-check this, but we spend 90,000 hours of our life probably typically working. I'm sure people in advertising do 2x.
Even after they're dead, they're like replying to email.
Yeah. And I like how you inhabited different worlds in your quest. And even though, like I said at the beginning, it's been only about 10, 12 years for you in terms of working professionally. I like how you've like inhabited these worlds, how your journey has sort of taken off. So in the spirit of what we discussed at the beginning, I want to like start with what you're doing now and then sort of go back. But what is working for you? What is a professional life in your opinion?
I think, look, it's very clear for me. All right. Like I look at myself as a creator. So now I don't like, sort of put any lines in terms of like, hey, am I a writer? So like, do I have any writing goals in life? Am I like a filmmaker? Do I have any filmmaking goals in life? Like, I genuinely want to just be a creator. Like creator can be like, I'm creating like work through writing. I'm creating work through maybe directing. I'm creating for the internet. I'm creating for maybe the TV, the television, or I'm creating wealth. All right. So I look at creating wealth also as part of like a job of a creator, like, like the best venture capital firms, anyone who's enabling businesses or creating businesses themselves are also creating something. And I feel like most of my friends, when I talk to, they just draw the line saying that, hey, that's business. Like, there's no creativity there, but like there is a problem being solved there in a unique new way with getting rid of inefficiencies of the past, which is very creative, probably. So for me, as long as I'm say moving an industry or moving a job or moving companies, like most of the times I'm like, is this like, like creating, like here I'm looking at like creating like an ecosystem in Web3 because there's nobody who's doing any of those things. And also like, hopefully creating good amount of wealth because it's a new industry. And like, if things go right and if, it should take off, like everything on paper on like, in what's happening in the world suggests that it is like the next evolution of web. So I look at myself as a creator, not so much as a writer or a producer or a director or like a business person.
If I have to go one step back, in what you were doing probably a year or a couple of years back, I think that manifested what you're just talking about, sort of manifested itself really, really well with the kind of work you guys did for brands like Hotstar and CRED, right? And that for me came a little out of the blue because there was not any buzz. There was no major company that you guys were running.
Correct.
There was no offices in Goa that you posted on Instagram about and all of that. Like,
yeah.
But talk to us a little bit about that entire journey of mainstream advertising for someone like you at that stage where you had I think you were still part of All Things Small.
Yeah.
And you created these extraordinary films for CRED and then Hotstar and everything else. What was the core of it?
I
Where
think
did it start?
I think that particular chapter, which is basically the start of the pandemic, 2020. I think that was just, Tanmay calling and saying that, hey, like, we obviously knew of CRED and we knew the team from, and saying that, hey, like, and, they just want, us to do anything fun. So I think it started from there. And I was like, so obviously, like, Tanmay has been my boss from, say, 2015, worked with him, like, very closely. And, like, he's someone, like, I really respect. And he said, like, hey, just come, let's do this campaign. And I was like, yeah, fine. And then, like, pretty much the core of it was like the ex-AIB writing team. So the first campaign was me, Tanmay, there was Puneet, and there was Nupur. So we all worked together at AIB and like, closely for like a good 3-4 years. And also what has happened is like after AIB, like most of us are still working together on like a lot of projects that are, that are not even comedy because there's a lot of comfort level and trust. And I think like the most basic what do you say? The I feel the secret sauce of the team working on these campaigns are like most, like 90% of the team had never done like probably TV advertising before. All right. And I was the only one with advertising, 7 years of advertising baggage, probably from 2008 to 2015. That was my first innings in advertising. And I'd quit and this was 2020. So it was like probably half a decade. So I'd forgotten like all the rules and regulations of advertising. And so I think what like works is that I think the approach to like creating anything is still like the approach of creating anything like at AIB. The rules of writing for the internet and YouTube and viral videos is completely different from our traditional rules of writing like a TVC. And the fact that most of the guys in the team didn't know the traditional TVC writing rules, and all of us applied our like YouTube video writing rules, where like, on YouTube, you have to be interesting, right? Like, and the algorithm is unforgiving and the audience is unforgiving because they just literally have to move on and click something else. So I think bringing that skill set and like ability that we had honed over like for the last half a decade into this form of writing and having a client basically, like, like that's why I keep saying that, like, I think we get like a lot of credit for it, but nobody understands the role of like the client in something like this, right? Like one is trusting like a bunch of creators who probably have never like conventionally done advertising work with your brand campaign, that to your IPL campaign. And then just after trusting is not just trusting, but like just giving us a free hand. Like there was literally, I don't think any like demands or any of those things from the client, right? Like the product window has to look like this, or like, the product has to say this. Like, there are no, like, there were no demands as such. So the client just let us go crazy and like just completely trusted us. And then we didn't like bite the normal writings of a TVC or how to think when a brief lands on the table. And I think it's just like a good amalgamation of this that sort of produced the work so far.
And that's amazing, right? I'm still stuck on that sentence, where you said you applied the rules of YouTube writing to TVC writing, and the end product was because of that so interesting and so so much of buzz was generated probably because of this, change of the workspace. You worked with clients earlier in your stint at Ogilvy and at Lowe. What was different, right? Because what is happening, and this is norm, right? Every time something cool happens in the internet, all the other brands want to sort of, tag that route. What was significantly different about working for a client like CRED when you compare it to your advertising days? Can you double click on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. Also, I think the one other thing also that comes into play is, the director, right? Like, if you look at it, all the work that we've done, most of the work that we've done in the last 1.5 years is with Ayappa. And he's probably like a proper like maverick in terms of humor in advertising in our country. And he stayed on top of the game for the last 14, 15 years. But he is now dyed-in-wool advertising, right? Like, so when he takes the material that that we have, and then he applies his filter on it, and then it sort of evolves into this. And now the reason why I'm telling this with respect to when you ask me the client question and not so much the creative question is because like what I've noticed, all right, is that most films, the journey of how it eventually is going to turn out is going to start probably after the film is locked, after the script is locked.
Right.
All right. Like how are the clients going to behave in the PPM? Okay. What are the dumb suggestions that they're going to have that we have to incorporate in the film during the PPM? Okay. It's like, and what is the say you're going to have like on the edit of the film? All right. And like, it doesn't matter. There is like, like the best ad filmmaker in the country working with you, but like you can ruin his edit by giving really dumb feedback and holding on to it. All right. So now all the clients that I had worked with in the past, not all, I don't want to generalize, there were like some really good clients, but most of the clients, they have they're very set, okay, in what they want to do. And I think the problem lies that once they say approve an idea, all right, they're not supposed to do anything. All right. They're supposed to hire like people specialists who can do this. And like, I think most of the times they just have to abide by our judgment and be okay with it. Now, most of the clients that like I'd worked with, or even now sometimes I deal with, they feel that they're not contributing if there is no inputs from their end, right? Like, but I think the job is to get out of the way,
right?
And then like only sort of tell us if you're doing something that's completely non-brand, but like in terms of storytelling, right? Like in terms of the edit of the film, like you cannot I feel that is a judgment that you leave to the creative team. So I feel even in the past, what used to happen was pretty much this, right? Like the client gets in the way. Sometimes they approve good work, and then they get in the way, and because they can't keep off of it, and then they kind of try and they also have their best intentions in mind, and also like we have to remember if you think of it from their point of view, it's a lot of money that they're spending. Right? Most of these campaigns is not just like the film they're spending money on, it's the media that they're spending money on. Right? So that's a lot of money on the line with their signature attached to it in their particular organization. So what really happens is sometimes they push for really brave ideas, and then they get scared midway, and then they start adding going back to safety after the idea is approved. And that is the worst thing you can do to a really good idea, is to execute it in a very poor way, right? And that completely screws up things compared to you take an average idea, execute it averagely, that will eventually still turn out better than taking a good idea and executing it poorly. So I think that is the basic difference, where one is bravery of the client, and two is the client understanding that their work is done, after they mostly hand over the film to us, which say in the cases of whatever brands that we work with now, the really good work I realize happens when the client is, just they trust and they're like, okay, yeah, you guys can do this. This is, you guys know, the audience is better. You guys know how things are eventually going to turn out. See, that's another problem, right? Because the medium is such that when you present a script to the client, or you present a script to someone, if you're not an expert, you don't exactly know how it's going to turn out. So play to your vision, but not to the director's vision. But in most cases, you just have to trust your director and creative team's vision, saying that, oh, okay, they are looking at it properly and they will get it done. So it's not something like, with a headline, for example, with a print ad, they exactly see the headline as it is.
Yeah.
Right. So it's easier to take a call for them. But with films, they see the script, and that leap from being able to visualize a script into a finished product, they can't do that. I mean, if they could have done that, they would be directors.
Yeah, they're not trained for it all.
Yeah, they're not trained for it. So I think that is where the disconnect happens, and that's where, like, you're not brave, and then you step in and then you screw things up.
Yeah, I guess that never happened, I would assume, in this. But do you have we all have our own favorite films, but which one did you have of the CRED films? Which one did you have most fun shooting?
I think most fun was I think the boy band film. All right, boy band film. I think writing that boy band film was like real good fun, because that was it just took us back to like AIB, where AIB was also that, right? Like spoofing a trope, taking a trope and just like turning it on its head, and then writing a funny song around it. So that was just like too much fun.
If it was not too much to ask, can you give us like highlights of the writer room process for that one?
Actually, the process for this is this film was a little not like normal as a AIB writing room, because like most of it happened on WhatsApp groups, like, hey, what about this line? Hey, what about that line?
Right.
And then quick calls, Zoom calls and everything. But I think that was written in like a day and a half. So most of the times it's this, like you just, you're like, okay, like, if you're writing a song, you take like a song, like you look at the tropes of a boy band song. All right. You're like, okay, there's always like sappy lines. Then there's always a backing vocalist who will re-utter the same word that the main guy uttered like one sentence ago, like, Then there is like a high point. Okay.
Yeah.
Then there's a lot of crooning. So then you listen to like basically like 10 Backstreet Boys songs and 10 Boyzone songs. And then you realize, oh, these are all the tropes of a boy band song. And then you start writing to that trope. So I think to write, that was the most fun.
Right.
And even to make it like, honestly, we wrote it and we got the song recorded and we just gave it to Ayappa. And then Ayappa had no time because it was all happening so fast. And then he had this whole, like the whole, whatever you see basically is like his work of art. Like even we didn't know what he was doing. So give it to him. And then he's like, I'll do a boy band on this. And then he sort of tacky green screen the whole thing, because that was also very 2000s, like little poor graphics. Like, but that poor graphics also on a Backstreet Boy song, it's when you look at it now, it's bad. It's not like when you looked at it in 2000, you still think it's cool.
Yeah.
It was a mix of all that. So that was super fun.
And it looked like they were having tremendous fun as well. I think I've not seen Prasad this happy since '96. So he was clearly having a great time shooting that. Yeah. And of course, I love the stuff you did with SRK on Hotstar as well. That was phenomenal. In a way, I want to sort of probably go a little to the previous chapter and tell you about something that I've become an extraordinary fan of. And I think in the last year and a half, everybody that I meet who's getting introduced to podcasts, I tell them that this is what you should first listen to. And that is Mission ISRO. Right. And basically the entire range of stuff all of you use, Sidin and many others sort of created at All Things Small. But Mission ISRO for me was very special because I've never heard a show like that at all out of India. Right. And at once it was very patriotic. And I think that's also what I had tweeted instantaneously after I finished listening to it, which is, if you ever want to like kindle nationalism and patriotism in this country, this is the way to do it. Right. Not making you stand in theaters and stuff. And there was this extraordinary marriage. As a quizzer, after every episode, I'm like taking down questions that I can use in the next quiz. There was so much information in it. And not at a moment was it boring at all, right? Correct. And then I was thinking, okay, so what is the precedence to something like this? I couldn't think of anything else, right? Maybe some great documentaries I've seen in life. But talk to us about how that entire thing shaped up. Where did it start and why did you want to do it?
So I think all the credit on Mission ISRO goes to Gaurav Vaz and Archana. So Gaurav is like my co-founder at ATS. So he used to be the bass guitarist for Raghu Dixit, and like he's been managing a lot of bands and he's been in the music industry for like the longest time. So he is born out of audio, right? So and he obviously and most of us forget, like for me, like I think my favorite part of Mission Asaro is like Raghu Dixit's soundtrack.
He was
right?
brilliant.
That, like, I think it's basically Gaurav using all his, music and his audio playbook and bringing it to this new form of storytelling, new at least in India. So I think that for me was the secret sauce over there. And I think, like, so the inspiration, I think, is like there's this BBC podcast, I think, called 13 Minutes to the Moon or something like that. So I think, it was like in a bunch of, like, pitches to basically Spotify. There were like multiple things. And this was one of the pitches, like, like, let's bring to life like India's mission to, like, space mission, because it's a very fascinating subject when you look at it, because there's a young India in 40s and the 50s. For me, like, the big part there was the crux of the story is that, like, there's not enough food to feed people. Okay. And then, like, the vision a government has saying that it's okay, let's mark aside some amount of money for space exploration and research. Right? Like, that is like what a big call to take, right? Like, and like it can go so horribly wrong also, if because they'll be like, hey, why is government wasting money on things when, like, there's a new country with 1,000 complications. So I think it starts off at like that's the biggest conflict in any story, right? Like, every story has a conflict, but this conflict, like, where will you get a conflict like this, where there is a country that is just like being born with 1,000 issues, in debt, like no money to feed the country, no money probably to even educate, its citizens, but decides to keep some amount of money and says, this is an important part of our growth. Let's explore science and let's explore, like, the space. So that conflict itself is crazy. So it starts with such great conflict. And I think the other thing that, like, Archana and I think Nupur in the first season sort of, like, really nailed it is in terms of, like, the writing. And we were very clear that, like, every episode should, like, almost have a 3-act structure. All right. Like, let's bring the rules of, say, fiction storytelling, which, like, any show you watch, right? Like, it leaves with a hook. And then there is a theme, like, underlying theme to every episode. What we are talking about is survival a theme, is innovation a theme, like, identify broad themes on episodes, and then just ensure that, like, somewhere it's, like, got a good solid 3-act structure, and it ends on, like, a good like suspense, so that you tune into the next episode. It might be science and all information, but it needs to be structured this way. So I think Archana doing that, and then Gaurav's vision with like music, and then getting Raghu Dixit to sort of bring this together and sort of produce it, is, I think, what really set it apart.
Yeah, and it was stellar, man. I think you spoke about how the audacity of that decision to invest in this, and not only that, I'm also thinking, like, the entire running of this, right? Even though there were 2 different prime ministers, probably many more in this entire journey, but the way it was run as a proper startup. Right, where you're collaborating to begin with, right?
Correct, without VC funding.
Without VC funding, and taking the know-how from outside to begin with, and then building your own IP. It was fabulous, right? But generally, as someone who spent a lot of time in the world of audio, I wanted to ask you, what is lacking today? In terms of things like these going mainstream, right? I think if this had been a Netflix special, I feel it would have been probably a less intimate piece of content.
Correct.
But at the same time, probably been created like way more buzz, and we would have spent millions making it as well. Right?
Correct.
What is the tipping point that is missing in audio?
I think attention span, right? Like, it's one place where I blame the audience and not so much like, what do you say, like the people creating it. I mean, the thing is, most of the times, like, it's a cop-out of an answer where you're like, I made a great movie, but nobody wants to watch it. Like, that is truly the case over here, is what I feel. That I think, like, as audio, right, like what has happened is, like, we programmed over the last 20, 25, 30 years as audio. If there's no beat and there's no rhyme to it, and there's nobody like doing a rap in the middle of it, you can't listen to it. Right. And it just, you're consciously programmed to doing that, which is crazy. But because before that, all right, like our radio days, like, people like the whole country consumed storytelling on radio, right? From sport to news to like, shows on science, on everything was radio plays. So it like the country, like literally the televisions came in, I think in the late 80s, early 90s. Right. And color televisions came in. Yeah, color televisions came in the 90s. So till then it was just radio. So I feel it's a combination of, after that, what has happened is classic case of like trying to get the audience. Radio started competing with TV. So when radio started to compete with TV, like they were like, okay, how do we retain like the users? So the only way we can retain is through music. And then over the last few years, it's just been like, music. And like even music, Karthik, is today's music is sort of like programmed to give us that dopamine, right? Like it's become like Facebook, Instagram, like, and this is scientifically proven as well, right? Like when do you get your dopamine hit? Like when a rhyme like falls to the perfect, when you hear the rhyme complete, you feel a release. All right. When you listen to a song that you already know, you feel a release. When a song that, and the unpredictability of what song is going to come next, and if that is your favorite song, you feel a release. So like even music has been programmed to that. And radio started competing with TV, and then they realized, okay, like we can't compete with, Star Sports, ESPN. So let's just take audio. And so it's basically that has happened to us over the last one generation. And we've sort of lost the attention span to listen to things and just only listen to things, right? Like even now podcasts are, people listen to it and do something else. Yeah. So I think it is going to take like some time, but it is going to come back is what I feel, where, people start getting used to audio storytelling. I think hopefully in terms of like, say like now audio devices are the thing. So everyone's always plugged into like, a headphone or like a earpiece. And I feel that, they're going to get fatigued by, okay, how many songs am I going to listen to? And hopefully like, a few minutes a day, tune into storytelling, and that sort of culture takes off. And hopefully we'll have more such shows.
Yeah, no, as you're talking about dopamine and music, I was just thinking, that's how I used to think of Rahman early on, right? Because he sort of perfected this art without necessarily probably knowing it or going through this rabbit hole, right? You always love a Rahman song on the 7th or the 8th listen, and he has these set pieces which you play, like a big shift in tune or a big percussion piece coming in on that high point.
Or his own voice.
Or his own voice. What a voice, man.
Yeah.
It's something else. Yeah. Just switching to another part of it, right? And when you was talking about the 3-act structure in Mission ISRO, I was reminded of another post you had written. And sort of probably even is connected to the CRED world as well. There's the thing on sports, right? And I feel like somewhere our sports story sort of is a little incomplete, right? And what you've written, to put it in context, is that, sports needs that contextualization with content. I always felt that sports is mythology, right? You need those comics, to worship your superheroes. And we've never really sort of had that, right? And what do you think, I'm just giving that as a background, but generally, if you look at the next sort of 3-4 years where a lot is happening in sports, how you see that ecosystem? What's missing and what are you looking forward to in that?
I think you will see a lot more, like I've written in the post, like, you can become a fan of any sport now with 1 or 2 shows.
Yeah.
Which earlier was not the case, right? Like I started following football from 2017. Okay. Like that's crazy. That usually is unheard of, where you become a fan of a sport and start following your sport in your 30s. It's usually something that you pick up as a kid or like in your teenage years or max in your early 20s.
Yeah.
Because that's when you have time to invest, because sport is an investment, right? Because you have to watch those matches, you have to like follow it, and then you have to watch it, and you have to be basically up to, why are you following a particular club and a particular sport, or you have a certain favorite player, is because of the story, right? Like it's like you have context to that. You have context to the fact that Cristiano Ronaldo is coming back. All right. And that is like, otherwise, when you watch a Manchester United game today, it's 11 players playing football and you're like, oh, Cristiano Ronaldo is good. Yeah. But you have that context that he is 36, he's coming back, and, he is coming back to a club where now it's not in the best place where it was when he left. So there is a great like redemption story over there. All right. Like what you would watch probably in a movie, where, a redemption story in a movie or a show is there is a hero who is reluctant, all right, firstly, who is aging. Okay, people are calling him past his prime. And then he finds a perfect match of his personality in a team, which is known to be like Chak De. All right, you have like a forgotten coach because of some things that happened in the past. And he's going back to like a women's hockey team, which hasn't achieved considerably before that. And then character and the environment matches beautifully for a story. And that is what the Manchester United story today is. Now, for you to appreciate this, like you need to understand all those things that happened in the year 2000 in Cristiano Ronaldo's career. And you have to come to this point, which till today would have been possible only if you are following it from the year 2004, 2005. Okay. Now, what content has done is that it fast tracks this whole process. Like you watch, like say 3 shows, all right, and you get hooked. And then you play, say you're playing FIFA on the PlayStation. What happens is you get hooked because you know which player is strong, which player is not when you're playing FIFA. And then you know, oh, you pick this particular team, I have to sub this player at this point. And then you know, okay, this player is the forward with a score of 94. So he must be damn good. So what happens is through numbers, through your gameplay, you sort of start understanding the technical aspect of the sport. And through storytelling and shows, you start understanding the context of this. So it's easier for you to now. I know a lot of friends who have gotten crazy into NBA after playing it on the PlayStation.
Right.
Because the next step is you know all these players by heart, you know their strengths, and you play literally with them. So you're like, hey, let me see what the actual sport is. And then you already know the rules of the get hooked. So,
or watching The Last Dance and
yeah,
stuff
exactly.
like that.
Or watching The Last Dance. So it can be a combination of these two things, or just like one of these things, and then you get hooked to that particular sport. So I think storytelling and content is, and now people have realized that. Like, for example, you know, we've all been seeing those tweets that Joe Pompiliano, what's his Twitter ID, keeps putting out about Formula One in the US, right?
Yeah.
Like it literally didn't have a market there. And I think now like 400,000 people showed up for the US Grand Prix. And I think this year or next year, there are going to be 2 US Grand Prix. So it just shows, and it's because of one Netflix show. And the reason is this, because now, like with Formula One, there's so much to know for you to get into the sport. But now there's, you know, you see 3 seasons of something that is so beautifully produced and slick and like fast paced, and it's got proper storytelling that you have enough context to sort of start following season. It's like this, you know, you watch 2 seasons of Succession, and now the 3rd season, you want to watch it live when each episode drops because you are very curious. So that's what will happen to sport, I feel. And now they will use this as a playbook. And then like you will, I feel, see leagues creating, like having more interest in the content that they're going to produce out of a season, because that is going to be marketing for the next season. And if people find really nice ways of telling these stories, for all you know, like Kabaddi right now is clocking, I think it's the 2nd biggest league in our country. Yeah. And it shows the fastest growth, I think, year on year, every year from when it went live. So now I think all it is lacking for urban Indians to catch up is maybe like a series, right? Yeah. Yeah. And if it becomes a thing, then like, so you get in through content, but you stay for the sport. So I think that's what might happen. And so you'll see newer sports emerge and become famous.
And we are extraordinarily advantaged with the number of stories that we have, right? Like,
yeah,
it need not be an actual sporting success in a mainstream sort of a definition, right?
Correct.
There could be athletes from small towns, and athletes from small towns itself is like probably 100 episode series of great human stories, isn't it? And I'm just really happy that now we're sort of moving away from, you know, what was like, if someone asked us probably 10 years back, name one sports film, we'll probably say Iqbal or Aval Number or some shit like that, right? Now
Aval Number. The Devanand film.
Yeah. And I think now there's a whole, I'm really looking forward to 83, for example. I thought that was a kick-ass trailer. Correct. It doesn't matter if the film is half that good, but I think they sort of hit the nail on that, right? You know, we were talking about the CRED pieces, and then we were talking about All Things Small. And one big chapter, you know, before that, I think, which was significant for everybody in the country, was AIB on Air. And I think you were an integral part of the team that did that. I for one, as purely as audience, absolutely loved that show, because It's probably like the nth attempt that India had made to bring in the entire late night scene to this country. And it was always stuck in different challenges, right? And what I loved about it was, to be able to have that sort of a political and a social commentary, but also keep it like super fun, right? And I thought that was a real tightrope that you guys walked so beautifully. And I was heartbroken, when you couldn't do it any longer. Can you talk to us a bit about from the inception of the journey to how it panned out?
Actually, you know what? I don't think I was an integral part to that show, but that show kind of, has a very integral, contribution to for me in whatever my journey as a writer. So I'll tell you why. So that show had so the writing room for that. So I was probably like 3-4 months into joining AIB and unlearning all the advertising kind of writing that I had sort of learned over the years. A very difficult time. And, because every day you're going to office and you are literally sitting with 4 of the best comedians in the country and you're trying to be on the same page as them. And you've got like barely 1-2 months of comedy experience or comedy writing experience behind you. So that way it was like a little bit soul crushing on a daily basis to just go and be like, "Arey, this is the amount of catching up that I need to do." And 3 months in, they decided, that they're going to like do on air with AIB, and then the show got sold. And then I'll tell you the writing room for that show. Okay. And this is before all these people became famous. So the writers room had up and coming comic at the time, Zakir Khan, Abhishek Upamanyu, Karunesh Talwar, Siddharth Dudeja. Then, of course, Rohan, Ashish, Tanmay, and Kamba. And it had, I think, Madhvendra Singh. And on and off, it had some other comedians coming and like contributing. So this is before, I think, most of these guys. I think Zakir was already like kind of, not as famous as he is today, but like he was a little bit there. But like the others, like Upmanyu and all these guys, I don't think they had even like YouTube channels of their own at that time. And now imagine before 3 months before this, I'm like trying to compete with like Rohan, Ashish, Tanmay and Kamba. And then after that, I'm like in this room with all these guys. All right. So that was just like one of the most amazing experiences. And I think I picked up most of like my writing and everything, just observing and kind of looking at these guys, right? Like jam jam on a daily basis, for about 12-13 hours in the same room with them, writing jokes. So it was like, I think the first episode or something like that, I had like close to maybe half a joke, not even one joke. And I felt very happy when half a joke made the cut. And I realized like by the end of the show, when it was the 9th or the 10th episode, I would have like 1 or 2 jokes, in the whole set. And, 1 or 2, maybe like sometimes not even the most important joke, but like that was a bar probably at that time in that room. And I think it was really good because I feel that, like you said, John Oliver had just kind of blown up, with that edgy brand of comedy on YouTube. I think what had happened is there was late night comedy with Jon Stewart kind of pioneered and everything. And there was a certain, like, this is my opinion of it, is that it was, I think, about 10 years maybe since Jon Stewart had started this whole wave of late night comedy, political news comedy as a late night show. And I don't think the format could evolve so much because of the constraints of TV, right? And then Oliver came in and showed everyone like, hey, okay, now you take this format into an HBO or a YouTube kind of a thing where there is no censorship. And this is like pretty much what you can do with like more production value, and obviously it was a weekly, not a daily show. So, and I think he really pioneered that best of both worlds and putting it together and made this new format. It was very fresh and it just blew up. And I think somewhere along the way, I think that was like, huge inspiration from there. I think the team had, and they kind of put this show together. And I think what happened was like in season one was like, I still feel was very good. But I think seeing the comedians who they have seen in otherwise very normal situations, sitting in like a studio with like a suit and tie and everything. But it really, I think, took off in the second season when I didn't write, I wasn't part of the writing team in the second season. But like I feel it took off in the second season because they just moved it to a very easy setting, like the whole show, but it's literally in a bar. So I think it was shot in summer house in Bombay, and like these guys is wearing what they normally wear and then just doing jokes. I think that kind of started, then the show started finding its sweet spot, and then kind of it stopped.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking, right? Like these kind of things take time, isn't it? Like, Stewart and then Colbert sort of coming out of that as a side show, and then having his own show, and then having his second show. Same with Oliver. And also, these guys were built on TV, right? From stand-up, they moved on to television and spent many, many years before they became like the face of the show.
Correct.
In that sense, I thought we got the protagonists bang on, right? Someone like Tanmay and Kamba and all of these guys who had a sort of a buzz around them, who had a bit of a standing around them and all of that. But the time it never really got, isn't it?
Correct.
What led to the end of it?
I think the third season was on, and that was the same time around which AIB had to wind up. So I think, if you ask me, I think the show was picking up. Like, the second season performed really well. And like I said, it became more relatable, like, to the audience because of the setting and because of the writing, and everything was very like easier compared to the first season. It felt was very heavy. And then I think the third season was just started. And then, of course, like, the whole episode happened and, around October 2018. And then AIB had to wind up. And I think that's the only reason why the show had to get cancelled. But I feel if, it had continued, it would have gone on to become a really, like, the format would have evolved, and there would have been like a, what do you say in the startup world, a good product market fit. I think it was just finding its good product market fit, and when this happened. But also what we generally forget is that most of like American, like the stand-up comedy scene in America has been around, I think, since the 50s or something like that, right?
Yeah,
It's a very old scene. And there are, colleges and schools. So I think even like a Colbert or these guys, they've studied comedy. They have, I think, degrees, or they've studied improvisational comedy for a few years before they kind of land on, before they get like, say, writing jobs. And then they kind of land on these shows as a side, character. But like with Indian stand-up comedy, it's so new. It's like, I think maybe now it's just completed a decade. It started in the 2010s. So it's now kind of completing a decade. And also there is no culture of like training, right? Like it's not like you study the craft for a few years and then you kind of go on to practicing it. Or there's no academic approach. I'm not saying academic approach like is the most significant thing, but I feel, academic, like when you're very academic about something before you start like, diving in fully, it prepares you, like you make lesser mistakes, I feel, along the way. So I feel the craft in India is itself like, just 10 years old. And with just that amount of time to see the kind of quality that comes out is like truly mind-blowing.
I often think of that part slightly differently. I was thinking if maybe what we were trying to, or rather what we're even mapping of stand-up comedy is the US kind of comedy in India, right? Like where there's a stage and a mic and someone goes. I'm just wondering if you take comedy, live comedy, as a culture, maybe it dates longer and maybe it's slightly different from what we today call as comedy, right? Even in urban towns, even on television, right? I think Raju Srivatsa in Hindi, or many people in satellite television in Tamil used to do it slightly differently, right?
Correct.
Yeah. But what do you make of that? I mean, this comedy in India now, so we are fully entrenched in that US sort of American sort of track of comedy, right? Do you feel that way?
Not really, actually. So I feel that we've managed to take the format, okay, like of like stand-up comedy. The basic rule is like it's one person on stage with a mic and an audience. So I think we've managed to take that format and like sort of Indian. I mean, look at Zakir Khan, right? Like it's look at Upaman. Look at the kind of non-English comics that are doing work. I think it's like it is, I feel sometimes more entertained, and I think sometimes they are more thought-provoking than like US stand-up comedy, because that's a life we don't relate to. We relate to that lives through movies, because we know there's a movie character who goes through that. Like whatever they're talking in the States, because the pop cultural explosion is so strong that we still relate to it despite not being in those situations. But I think, like, I feel like, for example, what Zakir kind of pioneered in India, which is like storytelling, like more than, I mean, of course he's funny, and of course, like there's he's got like everything that a great comic should have, but like he brought kind of storytelling onto this format, which I think is like it's pretty, and that format now, like a lot of other comics have taken on and sort of exploring it further. So I feel we are finding our own voice in this genre. And it's not just like, say, Hindi stand-up comedy, right? Like I see some amazing Kannada stand-up comedy popping up on my timeline these days. Like there's this group called the Tarle Box, and they are a collective, and individually they perform stand-up as well, which for just being 1 year into the craft, it is so good. Like these guys have such great stage presence and confidence, and like they understand like the beats of the joke and how they deliver it. It's really good, and it's only going to get better. So I think every language is kind of bringing its own nuance and its own flavor into this format and kind of making it their own.
Yeah, true. In fact, mid 2000s, Sun TV had I don't know, Sun TV or Vijay, one of the Tamil satellite television, they had a show which was on stand-up, but it became more slapstick than political, social sort of a narrative, right? But just going back to the AB on Air, there was a lot of envelopes that you guys pushed at that point, right? Like which didn't have any precedence. Like, can you talk about this on almost primetime television or not, sort of a thing? Like, what is the general pushback you got? Like, did you guys did the mission talk back to you at some point?
I mean, like, see, I think by then, the thing is, when you are writing comedy in India, right, you have internalized so many realities of this country, all right, that the machine already pushes back within yourself, right? So a lot of people like think that, like, oh, okay, like, do lawyers go through all the scripts and like, there must be like I mean, of course they do, but like, I don't think like there's so much pushback, because we already know what we can talk about and what we should not talk about because of, like, say, one or two bad experiences in the past, or our own individual Twitter, right? Like can we honestly just tweet about anything we want? That's not going to happen, right? So I think on a daily basis, when you're in the communications business and you're communicating through your social media and like you're just seeing things happening around you, you just immediately learn. So I feel of course I feel that it, like, the stuff was like, we pushed it right to the point, like almost bursting at its seams, and then we immediately know, okay, they can't do it, like, sort of more than, you can't take this more than this point. So I think we kind of defined like some points around, and we were almost at the border of pushing it a little too far, but like we just knew how to hold it back, right? And I think that's all of what's happening in comedy these days. So yeah.
And I think I was recently speaking to a data partner, for us, and they were talking about how they were part of the research process for AAB on Air. So I'm assuming things were also so well researched, and a lot of data points are probably unrefutable.
Correct.
That must have sort of been the plank in which you played.
Of course. Yeah, that's like very true. Like, you can't do an edgy joke about a fact that is wrong. Forget the lawyers. I think like Twitter is going to cancel you right there.
Right. But just to close this chapter, there are a lot of people trying to do that. Like, I mean, Abish has a very interesting show, rather had a very interesting show, and multiple things. But I feel like we've never not really got to that. I mean, realize the potential of what late night comedy can be, right?
Correct.
Do you think that ship has sailed, or is it probably a better time now to do something like that?
See, I think one thing that people don't understand about this is it's expensive. Okay, like people think, oh, it's just a set and then it's just one person talking, but the content that you kind of need to sort of churn together, it's a writing team of like a writing team of 10 to 12 people, to pull off something like this. I think the Daily Show has about 16 writers or something. I think even Oliver has some 14, 15 writers, and not like just 14, 15 interns or like writers of 1 year into their business, right? These are like 14, 15, like the best comedy writers in the country that you need to have on your roles on a regular basis. And comedy as a performer, if you're a stand-up comedian / performer, like you make a lot of money. So now, does the economics permit like someone to hire 14 to 15 really good writers on a monthly basis, like you pay them or per episode, and it takes time to write shows like this, right? It's not people come together for 2 hours in the evening, write, and then just move on. It is a 12-hour day job, right, to write something like this and to create something like this. So I think that is a significant amount of investment, and then time, and then finding the people who will stick by you for an extended period of time at that level of quality is a lot of money, if you ask. So now, is there does the economics of it work out? I think we'll know if one of these big giants, kind of like a Netflix or an Amazon, just decide that okay, this is a format that we could try, and this is a significant amount of investment that we can lock into this. And it also is like an acquired taste, right? I don't think even Daily Show immediately kind of landed and created waves. I think it took a good two, 3 seasons before it sort of really took off, if I remember correctly.
In fact, it probably took off along with the Iraq war.
Correct. Yeah. It took some time. And I think the only one of the few outliers is say Oliver, right? Right from episode 1, he was banging. That's because of the format was so fresh. So I feel unless one of these big giants, sort of put down that check and that commitment of 2-3 years. And also, let's face it, it's very difficult to kind of do these things in India today, right? Because of 100 other issues that kind of pile on with it, the risks. So the risk reward and the HR resource, HR coming together is a lot of money. So unless someone's putting down that kind of investment, you will not get that kind of quality.
Yeah, makes sense. You're a Trevor Noah fan?
Oh, big Trevor Noah fan. Kind of, for me, I mean, I consume my global news through him. And I don't watch or read any of the other stuff. So it's Noah. Then I do Colbert. Then I, whenever Oliver is on, when the season is on, and I do Oliver. So kind of these 3 people, kind of inform me about what's happening in the world because it is otherwise so depressing that you can't do it without consuming jokes.
Yeah.
And of course, Trevor Noah is I think he's just a crazy guy. If you read his book, it's insane. His journey is being just so inspirational, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that to me is I don't know, it adds a completely different flavor to. I feel like if you don't know his story and if you listen to him, you might not think much of it.
Correct. Yeah, that's very true. But also, I honestly became his fan, and then I read his book. But I think his brand of comedy, I think his point of view on things is very fascinating. It's if you look at otherwise kind of the late night scene, it's all white men exactly. doing white men comedy. But here is not only is this not a white dude, but he's not even American, right? He just sort of landed there in the country about 8-9 years ago. So the point of view is pretty insane.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know how we ended up getting into the rabbit hole of Metaverse, but I believe at some point in time, about 5-10 minutes back, we were talking about your podcast recommendations.
Yeah, so podcast wise, there's I think bad with names. Is there Catch and Kill, which is basically with that Pharaoh guy, the guy who broke the Me Too story,
right
across the world.
Yeah.
I think it's called the Catch and Kill podcast, if I'm right. Or you can link the proper one in your
show notes. We'll put it in show notes.
Yeah. So that was just phenomenal. Okay. Then there's this one podcast about the Quadriga crypto scam. Basically, these are all my podcast records come from Gaurav Vaz, and then I just listen to it, and then my mind is blown. So there's this one, I think 6 episode or 5 episode series on the Quadriga scam. It's basically just to teaser is that there was this crypto exchange in Canada, and the founder of that exchange is a young guy, obviously multi-millionaire. And then he's found dead in Jaipur or Udaipur. Okay. And then a lot of stuff gets. So basically, he's found dead, and he's locked in all the crypto from his exchange into this one place, and no one knows the password. And then it's just like, and then what happens, how things unravel from there. I think that is just like fascinating. And then of course, like, episodes like how you watch The Office when you're eating your food, like a random episode. Like, I think revisionist history is something that for me. Yeah. So when I don't know what I want to listen to, I just blindly just go hit play on any revisionist history episode, and then my mind is blown. So I think
what's your go-to in conversation podcast? Is it Tim Ferriss?
Yeah, it is Tim Ferriss, because I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of interest over there. So yeah, it is Tim Ferriss. And then there's this one series which is basically called We Fall or something. It's the story of WeWork. Okay. Yeah. I know it's like We Fall or We something. See, that is the problem with audio. The thing is, with audio, what happens is that because there's no visual thing when you're watching the reference. I can never remember the exact names of the series. Though I spend 5 hours listening to it, and then 1 month later I'm like, what is the name of that? So
it's funny though, but because scientific research, on advertising even otherwise, proves that your recall on audio is much
higher?
more than 2x, 3x higher than video.
Oh, something wrong with me then.
It's probably age.
Yeah.
I have the same problem with Netflix documentaries. I just cannot remember the names.
Correct.
I can remember fiction shows, but Netflix documentaries, I can't remember. I'll tell you that show about that guy who cheated the entire wine community. I don't know the name of that show.
Correct.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much. It was obviously a mind-blowing conversation, as I expected it to be. Good luck with everything that you're doing, and hope to probably do another one in a year or so from now, where we talk about all the successes in this chapter.
Hopefully. Thanks so much, Karthik, for having me at 8:30 in the morning. It's good. Now I genuinely, I'm like, oh, okay, now I have a lot more time today. Because it's 9 and I'm like, what do I do?
Hey, thanks, man. Cheers.
Cool. Thanks so much. Bye, Karthik.
Bye now. Yeah. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcasts.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to reach out to me, I am _Karthik. That's Karthik with an H on Twitter. And Filter_Koffee. It's coffee with a K on Instagram.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.
A wise man once said, traveling, it makes you speechless, then turns you into a storyteller.
Well, listen to such travel stories and experiences exploring India on the Musafir Stories with us, Saif and Faiza.
Catch us on the IVM website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from.